Okay, here we go. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? It's a neighborly day in this beauty wood, a neighborly day for a beauty. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? I have always wanted to have a neighbor just like you. I've always wanted to live in a neighborhood with you, so let's make the most of this beautiful day. Since we're together, we might as well say, would you be mine? Could you be mine? Won't you be my neighbor? Won't you please? Won't you please? Please won't you be my neighbor? Hello, neighbor. I'm Tyler, and a beautiful day in the neighborhood is NoPerfectMovie. And that's okay, because I could not imagine anyone else other than Tom Hanks as Mr. Rogers. And as expected, he completely knocked it out of the park. He did such a natural job at delivering his lines in a very slow and deliberate way, just like the original Fred Rogers did. And it turns out he actually spent hundreds of hours watching footage, not just of the original show, but of Fred Rogers himself behind the scenes talking with the crew just to see how much of him as a person was conveyed on the show. And the effort is very clear on screen. And the most amazing thing, for me anyways, is how he reveals so many things about Mr. Rogers as a person while still keeping him as a mystery. Because throughout the movie, he insists that he is not a perfect person and that he has natural flaws just like anybody else. But we never really see those moments for ourselves. He just tells us, and we just have to trust him and believe in him, and we do, because his flaws were not the reason that we watched him. We watched him because we wanted to learn from him how to have strengths, how to go through everyday life in such a happy and optimistic way. And when he really reaches through to people, like if you've seen the trailer when people see him on a subway and they start singing to him, that brought such a huge smile to my face and just brought me back to watching the show as a kid. And there are other much more somber and serious moments that, I gotta be honest, I teared up multiple times in the best way possible. I haven't felt that way in a movie theater in a really long time. And the person I was worried about the most but ended up being the biggest surprise was Matthew Rhys. He was outstanding as this journalist who was requested to interview Rogers, and he's a very cynical person. He had a difficult upbringing, he hasn't completely gotten over that. But when he meets Rogers, starts to listen very closely to his words of wisdom and watches him on set performing his show, he begins to slowly realize that he can have a much more optimistic outlook on life as long as he puts the effort into it. Especially during one scene where he's watching them perform in the land of make-believe, and the story that the puppets are acting out correlates with an incident that happened to him in his childhood, and we only get this close-up of him silently observing and thinking about whether or not he can forgive and forget the people who have wronged him in the past. And as a director, Marielle Heller did such a good job at capturing the original feel and spirit of the TV show. Whenever they're filming on set and we get to see through the camera and the TV's perspective of what watching Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was like, it almost looks verbatim. The music, the sets, costumes, even the aspect ratio. The effort really goes to show, and it adds to the authenticity of what it was like to watch it. And that's because they actually did film it at Fred Rogers' studio in Pittsburgh, and even used some of the exact same broadcast cameras that PBS would have used. There's even a really good stylistic choice where the Fred Rogers miniatures are actually used as scene transitions, where the camera would zoom out from Rogers' house and go somewhere else. In this case, it's New York, and for 1998 New York, the miniature sets look just like New York City, right down to the Twin Towers, the lights, the planes and cars that obviously are moving in a fake and phony way, but you just don't care because it really has that nostalgic feel to it. Now, I have two minor issues with this movie. One of them involves this arc around Chris Cooper as this journalist's father, and he does a really good job as usual, but at the beginning, when they have to explain why the two of them are at odds with each other, their dialogue and the way it's presented to us feels really heavy-handed compared to the rest of the movie. It does become more natural over time as things change between the two of them, but it was a bit of a rocky start. And there's one scene in particular that really took me out of the movie. It involves a dream sequence that sets up the more tearjerker moments of the movie. And it sets up those moments very effectively, but the sequence itself felt really out of place, and I have no other way of describing it other than it was just so silly and over the top and kind of cartoonish, which I can't really call Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood as cartoonish, despite the fact that there are puppets who their eyes and their lips don't even move. But outside of that, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, just on viewing one, is already in like my top 4 favorite movies that I've seen so far this year. Tom Hanks and Matthew Rhys work so well together and work so well just on their own as these characters. Marielle Heller does a very good job at directing in such a seamless way where you don't even notice the direction. You just pay attention to what's on screen and nothing else. And the spirit, the feel, and just the nostalgic sense of wonder that came with watching Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood is in this movie from scene 1. And for that reason, I'm going to give A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood a 4.5 out of 5. Definitely go see this one in theaters when you get the chance. Guys, thanks as always for watching. Be sure to let me know in the comments below what you thought of this movie, what you thought of Mr. Rogers. What was your favorite Mr. Rogers episode, if you can remember one? And I'm not going to sing the outro to the show because I never paid attention to the words. It was my least favorite part of the show because that meant it was over and I had to go to school. So anyways, be sure to like, subscribe, check out my other reviews at NoPerfectMovie.com. Take care.